Hello and welcome to PRT, that's Paranormal Round Table. I'm your host, Josh Turner, also known as Wolf. And with me tonight is I have a guest, but I also have a co-host. You want to say hello?
Yes, hello, everybody. This is Zane.
Zane.
Y'all having a good night?
And Anthony's sitting in as always. And we have a special guest, and it is someone that I've been wanting to talk to for a while. But before I introduce her, let me get to let me get all these other things out of the way. We have Paranormal Roundtable groups from Facebook. We have Paranormal Roundtable, then we have Paranormal Encounters, which belongs to Mushu, that's Tony. Then we have Paranormal Lounge, which is Nellie's group. Then we have Whisper to a Scream podcast group, which is Ryan Tremblay's group, and I'm an admin in that group, and I'm also a co-host on that show that comes out every Sunday at 7:15 Central. And then I also have my show that drops, this one here, on Friday. Every Friday, we drop another episode at 7 o'clock. And then we also do a Q&A, which runs anywhere from an hour and a half to 3 hours, depending upon what's going on, every Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. And we do that. That's all Central Time. Now, we also have prtpodcast.com, prtpodcast.com. That is the website where we have a lot of our shows on the archives. You can also find us on YouTube. That's our main platform, but we're on other platforms. But even if you listen to us on Spotify or Google Tunes or iTunes or whatever you listen to us on, we ask that you go and like and subscribe because that's how we make revenue for the show to keep it going. We also have a Patreon now that's set up, and we have $10, $5, and I believe $3 tiers. Is that correct, Anthony? Two, three, five, 3, 5, and 10. Yeah. Okay, so we have a $3, $5, and $10 tiers, and you can support the show that way. Also, like I said, don't forget Whisper to a Scream podcast. That's the new show that I'm doing with Ryan Tremblay, and we just we're doing that one. So. Don't forget about the book giveaway we do every week. We're going to do it this week just like we always do. We give away an autographed book from an author, and it can be anybody, Nick Redfern, Ken Gerhard, Linda Godfrey. There's multiple art authors that we have autographed books from. And we don't forget about our merchandise from the store from prtpodcast.com. Also, we do art submissions, and we are doing an art contest that we're going to continue to do throughout the year. We're going to do a different cryptid every 3 to 4 weeks. And so at this point, at the time of this recording, I don't know exactly which cryptid we're going to be on, but just remember that we have the art contest, the Willie Williams art contest, in honor of my friend who passed away of brain cancer. So all that being said, my email address is joshturner@prtpodcast.com, joshturner@prtpodcast.com. Send me your stories. Or if I'm on Facebook, send me a message on Messenger with your stories, and I'll get back with you as soon as I can. Also, if you send me a friend request, once again, I'm going to remind everybody, let me know that you're a listener of the show, or I will not accept it. I just try to keep my friends list tight. And if you're a listener of the show, I will accept your friend request as long as you don't do anything that's ridiculously bad. And so, all that out of the way, I want to introduce my guest, Dana Holyfield. Dana, you want to say hello?
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. The question is, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
Doing pretty good?
Trying to stay warm down here in Louisiana. It's kind of cold.
Yeah, it is. It's Louisiana and Texas actually get cold, folks. People are surprised by that. They're surprised that they're like, wow, it gets cold down there? Yeah, it does.
Yeah, really cold sometimes.
And where are you located at?
I'm in Slidell, Louisiana, which is
near New
across
Orleans?
the lake from New Orleans, about 35, 40 minutes from New Orleans.
Okay. And
in Honey Island Swamp.
Honey Island Swamp. And that is the key, folks. That's what we're here to talk about, is the Honey Island Swamp Monster. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Honey Island Swamp Monster. Dana has been on television with her documentary based on Harlan Ford, who was her grandfather, who was tracking this creature for a long time. And so him and a friend of his right? They were looking for this the Honey Island swamp monster, and a lot of the locals in that area just swear up and down that this creature exists. And Dana, you're a believer, and you wrote a book about that.
Correct. Yes, I wrote a book called Encounters with the Honey Island Swamp Monster and Honey Island Swamp Monster Documentation. Made a documentary film about it, and it was my grandfather's story. Plus, I had interviewed like 13 eyewitnesses in the area who also had an encounter or some type of sighting.
Through all that, through all your work, and just, I mean, because we're going to go through some of this, but what, in your opinion, like the ultimate conclusion to this? I mean, like, if you had to say, is it a Bigfoot? Is it a dog man? They call it the Rougarou. I mean, what do you think it is?
Well, from what the description of what everyone described this thing as looking like, and it would probably be, I would think, more in the Bigfoot type family, but he's not as big. I mean, his feet's not as big as what you normally find in the like Bigfoot family, and plus they have only 3 web toes and like a dew claw on the side, so the foot's different. But the way they described it is when it stood up and it had the long hair and the. But then again, I mean, so does what they call the dog man and different things. So I don't really. It's just, I think it's just its own type of thing out there that lives in a swamp type of setting, something that could adapt to being around water, because some of the eyewitnesses have seen it swim the bayou or, across the river. And you would think, living in a swamp, you would have to be able to do those things. And then the tracks, to me, looked like they had webbed, like the toes were sort of webbed, like so. But then other people said they saw it climb up in a tree, that it could climb too. So, but I'm not really sure if I would say it's the Rougarou but it could be related. I mean, it has to be. It seems like it would have to be, One of the eyewitnesses did say that the face, when they described the face, had a long snout, like more of a smooth, long snout type in the face area. So that sounded more like it could be in the dog man or Rougarou family. But
so that's your conclusion to it. So there you have it, folks. That's it for tonight. Dana has solved the mystery. It is something that's like that. And thank you for coming on, Dana. We appreciate it. Well, see you, folks. I'm just kidding. I'm just joking, guys. People are jumping out of their seat like, what? Because and I have to preface everything with, I'm just kidding. Before we move on, because then everybody gets upset if you don't tell them that, because people take it seriously. So, so anyways, I'm just messing with you, Dana. So that's very interesting, and that opens up a whole dialogue that we're going to get into, because I have a lot of questions, and one of them is, you yourself personally, you've been out there, and you've looked for this. Yeah,
I grew up out there.
Yeah. And you've looked for this thing. You've gone out there and done your boots on the ground, as they call it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I've been out there. There's been times when you're out there and you hear it, and that, at least I did. I know that it had to be the same thing that my grandfather seen, and other eyewitnesses that had some type of encounter where they heard it scream out. And when you hear that, it sends chills up your spine. But I found tracks when we were, been out there. I've seen similar tracks to what my grandfather had found. And when I've had people call me out there to go look at tracks that they found. And so, and then the camping out, I had an experience camping out one time with some people, and it threw a stick towards our camp. At least I think that's what it was throwing. It's like a territorial thing, like it didn't want us there. And then we put up a motion camera, and I heard something in the night we were in the tents, and I heard like it was walking on 2 feet. It didn't sound like a hog or something rutting around out there. It sounded like something stepping, like a person would do almost, but couldn't see it. But when the next morning we took the trail cameras with us and went back to the camp, they had something that had like it looked like if something hairy leaned over, and you could see the edge of it with the hair on it, as if it leaned over to look at what the camera was. And the camera was high up in the tree, so it wasn't like something on, low to the ground like a hog or, but so we don't really know if that's what it was, but I just felt like whatever that was, it threw the stick at us. And also we had heard something beating on a tree, like far off as we were setting up camp. And I just felt like, that was probably what that was. Didn't want us out there, because we were way out there in the middle of nowhere. It was like, it was I felt it was a territorial, like, so.
How large?
There was another time. Huh?
I'm sorry, you go ahead.
How large?
Yeah, I was going to say, how large is this creature said to be?
Well, my grandfather described it as he was 6'4", and it was a little bit taller than him. He would say about around 7 foot. He said the shoulders were very wide, large shoulders. It had long arms that hung way down, and long hair around the face area. Like it was his face. The face area didn't have the hair on it, but around it, he said the hair hung way down almost to the ground, and the arms were very long. But when it stood up and faced them, he said the thing he remembered most was the eyes looking at him. He said it had these big amber colored eyes, very intense, staring down, just staring really hard. And it turned and ran. And, because they were trying to get their guns out because they didn't know what it was going to do. He said, but this thing had a look to it that it scared the hell out of him. He said, he'll never forget those eyes. And, he said they didn't think to look up in the trees. They never heard it break water. They couldn't see where it went to, but they never thought to look up. And then later we had heard some other eyewitness said that it does climb in trees because they saw it up in a tree. So it's he said it also weighed about 400 pounds by the tracks, when they cast the tracks, and he took the tracks to like a wildlife and fisheries agent that he knew. And then they turned them over. They brought them to the LSU zoology department, who looked at them. And I think he said they even had sent them to the Smithsonian Institute. But the people at LSU said that they couldn't identify what, they believed him. They just couldn't identify what type of animal had made them.
And so you've been out in the field, you've looked for this thing. Harlan and his friend had their encounter, and now he was so doggedly determined to find this creature. He actually got footage, an 8mm film.
Right. He had, after that first encounter, which happened in 1963, he started bringing he had one of the 8mm film cameras that he used to use to take video. First, he took video of the family, of course, but he also started taking the video camera with him every time he would go out there, just in case he would ever, see this thing again. And then, I guess it had to have happened, because we don't really know when he got the film, because we didn't discover it till years after, he had died. Actually, it's when my grandmother found the box that it had all these 8mm films in it that were labeled. Some of them were labeled like alligator, deer, or, egret. He liked to take pictures of the wildlife. And then that one reel had Honey Island Swamp Monster written on it with a piece of masking tape. And my grandmother's like, I don't know what this is, but you're welcome to look, use it if you can. And so she had the projector, and we set it up in the kitchen on the white wall, and we were all standing around waiting to see what we were going to see. And we were stunned to see this thing walking across the, in the far distance. He was up in a tree blind. And so I said, well, it looked like he got closer than we thought he did the second time. And then I asked her, why do you think he didn't let anyone know about this tape? And she said that probably when he first had the sighting, and then he found the tracks, and then the tracks ended up, the local news got wind of it, and then he did that show In Search Of, come to interview him with Leonard Nimoy, and he was also on there with another old trapper called Ted Williams. And after that aired, then people it went crazy around. My grandmother said it was like monster mania. Everybody wanted to come down here to hunt the Honey Island monster. They were coming with guns, and they were going to go shoot it. And the game warden had to ward off people, telling them, you can't go in the swamp, just shoot at anything. And they were afraid people were going to end up shooting each other, because people will go in the swamp that's not familiar with it. You get spooked out there and turned around and see something and just shoot, like it could be a human they would shoot by accident. So she said that was one reason. And also she remembered saying that he just wanted to find out more about this thing and get to, as close as he could. And so it was like he had this, but we didn't know until she found it after he had died and his belongings.
In the swamp is not the place to go running around, because you can get lost.
No.
You can get killed really
easily.
quickly, very easily. There's a lot of stuff that can kill you out in the swamp. And then it's interesting too, that you said that this thing has like webbed feet, so it's like adapted to the water. I've fielded many reports of these things swimming. They're actually excellent swimmers. Lake Stanford comes to mind. I interviewed a guy that was telling me about a dog man that was swimming out, and the way it was swimming, he said it was just like just moving along, and it was moving quickly toward their boat. And he thought, okay, well, we're just going to start the boat and take off, and then the thing stands up because it's not that deep, and they didn't realize that it was pretty shallow, and it just started running toward them, and he had a really good look at it. The detail was pretty amazing. Like, him and his friend, they said it had like part of the right side of it. I think the right side of its mouth or something was tore up, or maybe it was the other side. But they said that it was like you could see like there was a scar on its face. So it was that close that they could see that, and it was. But these things are excellent swimmers. These cryptids that I've I've interviewed people about. So people think, well, if maybe if you run in the water and you can get away from them or something. No, they swim pretty good. Canines are good swimmers, but Bigfoot, there are lots of reports of Bigfoot in the swamp too that can swim. So either way, you have, so people going out into the swamp, it's a very dangerous venture, to go out there. And then if they're half cocked and scared, shooting each other, there's no telling what could happen. So I think it was smart on your grandfather's part not to add fuel to the fire. I have a question about that too. When you were little, did you spend time with him, like going out there, do anything like that?
Yeah, I didn't. He didn't. We went out. Not look. I didn't know we were looking for anything. I'm sure he was looking while we were there. But we went. We've been camping and going on fishing. I've been fishing with him, but I just remember growing up, him telling me, we were, sitting at the kitchen table one time, and he was telling me, I asked him about it, because I'd heard, my mom had told me, and, but when he seen it the first time, she was, she remembered him coming in, and he was with his friend Billy Mills, who was a co-worker and also his hunting buddy, and to tell telling the family what had happened. And she said, so of course I wanted to ask him questions about it as I got older. And he told me, he's like, yeah. And, I did see something, and it wasn't like anything I'd ever seen before. It wasn't really, he said it was too human to shoot, that he would, he said, I would only shoot it if it would have come at me. He said, because it looked too human to because he was a big hunter and fisherman out there. But he said it scared him. I remember him saying it was very scary. It scared the hell out of him, is what he said. And, just hearing how my uncle also was telling me that he used to be one that would go out there. They built that camp out in the middle of the swamp, and he would never lock the doors up until when that happened. He used to take a rope and tie the doors shut, tie them in at night, just because he knew what was out there. It didn't scare him enough to where he wouldn't go hunting out there, go stay at the camp. But he always had his gun ready, because he said this thing was menacing looking. It was pretty scary.
Did he think there was a population of them, or if was it just like a one-off?
Well, he did. Yeah, he found different size tracks out there, and then the other eyewitness in that time, around that time, was the old man Ted Williams, the trapper. He said that he would see them swimming in pairs across where he would go fishing and running his lines and his traps. And he said they would get so close to the boat sometimes that he would just sit there. And he said they were so close one time, they got out and they shook off, and the water, he was close enough he could feel the water. And he said they'd go on about their way in the woods, and they said they never bothered him. So he left. He never bothered them. But he was one that come up missing out there and never was found. Well, actually, I take that back. We thought for many years he never was found, but he was one of his, I think it was grandkids, contacted me a few years ago to tell me that she wanted to let me know they did find his body. Now, I'd always heard his body was never found, and his boat, or they found his boat, but they didn't find him. Like he fell out the boat, or something happened. But she told me they did find him, but she never said how he died. Like what was the cause of death. And then there was another man that went out there looking. He had seen it, and he come up missing out there, and he was never heard from again. And his grandson contacted me a couple of years ago to tell me what really what happened, and it was a very interesting, scary thing. He didn't want me to use his name or to tell because of the family, but I've been trying to contact him, see if he would be willing to talk about it, and if he was ready to let me tell him who they were. But so it was just, I've heard a lot of things that go, and a lot of people don't want they just don't want people to know, because they're afraid people will think they're crazy, or, but he said his grandmother and them kept it for a long time, just like that he just disappeared out there. But he actually went out there to hunt. He said he knows where the den was, and he was going out there to kill it, and they never found him again.
Oh, well, I guess he didn't succeed.
No.
Oh my gosh.
I don't guess so.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was many years ago, but I'd heard that he disappeared, and he had gotten too close. They told him he got too close. You were getting too close to him. And then I didn't know if that was true or not, because I'd never met the man. I just heard about it. But then when the grandson contacted me to tell me the story, I said, oh, well, maybe it's true.
Let me ask you a question, Dana. Like, you had said that most of the eyewitnesses describe it as you would say, not putting things into a box, but you would say it was more like a Sasquatch type creature. But then the dog man kind of came up because you said that there was a snout on some of these. So do you think there's maybe two different things going on there?
I don't know. I don't know. Because of a lot of the eyewitnesses that describe it have pretty much all described, something tall with broad shoulders that stood on 2 feet with the long hair that hung down. It was like a muddy grayish kind of look, type of hair, like almost mossy looking, but like matted and tangled because it's out in the swamp, getting all wet and muddy. But because it walks on 2 legs, and I don't know. I don't know. It could be, but I don't know. They would have to hope they get along if they are.
Yeah, well, or maybe they just avoid one another because
yeah,
I know,
maybe.
in a lot of areas that I've investigated, done investigations with Devil's Backbone, the LBL. I haven't been to the LBL, and I don't plan to go there. I don't want to be around them. But, I know that, like, there's one area where the Bigfoot are, and then the one area where the Dogmen are. And it's kind of like that. It's like north-south, but in Devil's Backbone, it's kind of east-west. You have one area where it tends to be sort of Dogman terrain, and then the other side is Bigfoot terrain. And when I was interviewing Linda Godfrey, who's done a lot of work, written a lot of books about the Dogman, that's one of the things that she pointed out too, is they tend to stay to their own areas, and everybody's kind of got their own opinion about that. But that's kind of been my experience. When I took a map and I looked at the Devil's Backbone, that's an area here in Central Texas. We noticed like a little, if you put a red dot on the map, and me and my brother did this, a few years ago, and we were just kind of like dotting it out of the reports we had gotten from the Dogman, Bigfoot, and believe it or not, Goatman. Goatman were all centered around this area called Purgatory Road. And then the Dogman reports were on one side of the map, and then the Bigfoot were on the other side of the map. The Bigfoot were like in I believe, the west side, and then the east side was like Dogman territory. And then in this valley, it was kind of a mixed bag. In the valley, which is called the Haunted Valley, it is like the separating point. You could literally see that was the separation point. So like once you crossed in from that valley, and Zane, you know what I'm talking about. And Anthony, where when we go to that little rest stop right there.
Yeah.
That valley where you overlook that rest area where all the keys are from the people who've died.
Right.
Okay. And that's another thing too. There's been a lot of accidents because it's a very dangerous, windy road.
Yeah.
But people have hung locks out there in memory of people who've passed away. So there's like this, you could see down into the valley, and if you just look to the left, that is like the dividing line. It's like there's a bunch of Bigfoot reports, and then you look to the right, that's where all the Dogman reports are.
Yeah, it's like 2 separate areas. 2 separate areas.
I mean, it's very weird, and it's an area where the Comanche and the different types of Apache Indian they roamed around all over that area.
They say there's gold out there somewhere,
and there's gold buried out there, and a lot of people claim that they're still seeing native ghosts to this day. They see these cryptids, and it's just a very spooky and weird place. People see Confederate soldiers wandering around out there, conquistadors, monks. But the thing about the swamp is that if I could ever avoid it, I will. Because it's just like
you got to go down there at some point.
Like I know
nice
you haven't. Places out there. It's really pretty.
But when you think of the swamp, it conjures up. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dana.
As long as you know where you're at and you can get out of there, it's got some pretty places up in there.
I always think of like you're just gonna have to tromp through water. Like. No, we
go in a boat.
Yeah, because
we will get out on land when there is land, but sometimes the river's so high there is no land out there.
Yeah, so these things would have to be like pretty aquatic, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have a lot of natural predation too. You would kind of have to take care of,
like alligators,
just stuff.
There's gators everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, but it really depends on how far into the swamp you go. Like Slidell's farther north of New Orleans, by like maybe 30 minutes north, I think. Something like that.
Yeah, across the lake, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it gets wetter up there, but I think that area more is more swamp-like, with like marshlands and stuff like that. And I think if you go to some other places, there's more dry areas. It just depends on what place, you end up going. But that one specific area is a lot more wet, and you know you have to think too that Louisiana is already under sea level. So like if it even rains a day, like it's gonna be just nasty. It's just, you know, there's nowhere for it to go. It just builds up, and you know.
Well, I went out to New Orleans. I've been through there once.
Yeah.
And I went through that area where Slidell, you know.
Right.
And a buddy of mine years ago, he was kind of a nefarious guy, and he's still a friend of mine. We're all reformed people now, but at one time we weren't always on the up and up guys. And he wanted me to go to this abandoned house where he had, you know, and help him, you know, dig up something. And I'm like, I don't want to be at the Skeleton Key house with the gators. And it literally looked like that. And I was like, nah, dude, you're on your own. You go ahead. You know, like you go ahead and go into that house and you dig out whatever you got to get out. And you left in there. I'm not. And then while I'm sitting there, I'm hearing splashing noises because the water's just right there.
Yeah.
So I ran inside because I got tired of being around what obviously were some sort of creatures running, you know.
Yeah.
And I've been in swampy areas in Central America, and I was just like, I don't want to deal with that because I got knocked off my feet one time by a caiman.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was. I think it was because I kicked it like on accident, and it luckily for me, it wasn't like a large, you know, monster or anything. He just knocked me off my feet, and I was like, I never ever wanted to be in that sort of environment or water again. So that was the one time where I was ever in that sort of environment, and I was like, you know, I'm not doing this. And then we went to New Orleans, and I didn't really get to go into the nice areas, the tourist areas, whatever. It was just, you know, in and out, and then never went back. But I have a lot of friends, and of course, Zane, you stayed there. You know, they're always like, come to New Orleans, come check it out, blah, blah, blah. And of course, we got reports of a security guard who used to work for the Six Flags.
Oh yeah, the abandoned one.
The abandoned Six Flags, yeah. And it was apparently another time where it had rained really heavily, and then right after that, as the water was starting to subside, he got a report, you know, of one of his guards, like he was the field captain, I guess it would be the equivalent of the field captain, that called in and said, hey, I saw something walking around out here. He said, well, was it a person? And he goes, I don't know what it was. So he went to go back him up. That guard handed him the keys and said, I'm out of here, goodbye, and left. And so then he called the police. The police came and they said, you know what, kid, you're on your own. You want to go dig around and check around out there, you go ahead because we don't go in there. And they literally left him by himself. So curiosity, he drove in there. Subsequently, he became a police officer out here in Central Texas. And he was a security at that time. So he drove in there in his little truck, and there were certain spots where it was flooded out. Like you couldn't get to, you know, it's been abandoned for a long time. And he saw something really weird, like run across the road, and he was just like, I'm out. And to this day, he couldn't tell me what it really was. He just kind of got the side and back glimpse of it. It was a large, hairy creature that was covered in wet, like mud. And that was the description he gave me. And he had, you know, he never really went into more detail about it. You know, of course, he's a police officer now in Central Texas, and he didn't want to, you know, I guess to say too much. But he told me and a couple of my friends about it, and he backed out and he took off. And so you get these reports of these hairy creatures, you know, in these swampy areas, and they are living in a hostile environment. You know, I mean, you're living around gators.
And they also have a hog problem similar to ours.
And hogs everywhere. So you have to be a tough SOB to not only live in that area, but to thrive and create a breeding population of whatever your species is. You have to be pretty tough.
And that one area, too, is pretty cut off, I think. I mean, I've only seen, like, bird's eye view images of it, like the actual facility. And it looks very, like... I don't even know why they would have security there. Like, there's nothing really to guard. Like, it's kind of just all overgrown.
Well, I think it's more of an insurance thing.
Yeah.
Because if somebody goes in there and gets hurt, because they still have not, the whoever owns the property could still be sued. I think that's why.
Yeah, but it seems you have to go kind of out of your way to get there, though.
It wouldn't be people.
Yeah, right.
But people do go in there because it's been graffitied up and everything else, because I've seen pictures. I know that, you know, there was a place where Anthony and you and me and we all your uncle Russ, we all guarded back in the spring. I think it ended in the summer, and it was completely destroyed.
Yeah.
But we had to guard it because people that owned it, they had an insurance deal.
Yeah.
So that I think that's more along the lines of what they're doing there, because somebody has to be responsible for that.
Well, I would hate to be the dude who works that shift.
Yeah, and they do have people that do it. Yeah, and this guy told me, he goes, I worked it, and he goes, I don't want to say too much, and he didn't know me that well at that time, and he told me a little bit about it, and
yeah, the NOPD is notoriously hands off too. So
they showed up and they were like, yeah, well, take it easy, and then he said that even one of them mentioned the Loop Guru.
Yeah.
He said it's probably a Loop Guru, and then he said this one cop was like, that's probably a Loop Guru. You better get out of here, boy. And then he just left.
Yeah.
And so he was just like, what in the heck is a Lougarou? Because this guy was from Kentucky originally. And he's like, what is a Lougarou? And so then he dated this girl, and she used to work in the French Quarter. And she told him, she's like, oh, the Lougarou is basically like the same, because in Kentucky they have these stories of these canids, upright canids. She's like, it's a werewolf. And he goes, oh my gosh. And like, so y'all have them here too. And she's like, oh yeah.
But do you see, like, I always consider like New Orleans werewolves like the OG of werewolves.
Yeah.
Because Louisiana was just there first. Like, I mean, like,
well, you got vampires
historically
too.
speaking, yeah.
And I mean, I'm not kidding. I don't know, Dana, if you know much about the vampires, but I've gotten some stories out of there that would just, crazy stuff. Like people talking about, feeling like they're being hypnotized by someone, and the next thing you know, they're in their apartment. And then this one guy, I'm not going to get into the whole story, but he left off of their balcony. And it was a story I told on the show before. And I've since that episode, I've gotten 2 or 3 more. And I had a guy that went to New Orleans to hunt dogmen and ended up going into a club. And he believes, and he told me and you, Anthony, and who are we with? Sal, the old co-host. And he said that, he thought that they were going to be, something was going to happen to him. I mean, there was this nightclub, and then the next day they went to that area to look for that place, and it was just a warehouse. It was just like a abandoned building. There was no nightclub there.
Yeah, I have one kind of encounter. I don't know if it's a vampire or not. I kind of thought it was maybe like a ghoul or something of some sort, but I can even tell you the intersection that I was on when I saw it. And it was me and one other person. His name was Jacob, and he was a good friend of mine. And we were walking back to the house, and you know how the highway, they have those little like they have like an underpass you can walk through to like get on like the other side, and usually that means that you're entering like another part of the neighborhood. So I was walking through the French Quarter going north towards Metairie, and I was about to cross the highway there, and I was maybe 2 blocks away, and it was like 3 a.m, and there was just this very pale, like, he didn't look dead or decayed or like anything like just real weird like that, but there was just something off about him. He was very, I don't know, kind of formless in the way he moved and real just like stoic. And he kind of passed us, and like I thought it was weird because I didn't give him like too much of a second glance, but like once he passed me, like like that heightened fear sense just kind of goes up. Like you get that weird like feeling of just something's not great, and then he kind of makes us like a comment like hey, did like you see that guy? And like I turn around and I look, and he's not there at all, and we're down the road. There's nowhere that he could have like turned. There's no like
he was gone.
House. Yeah, there was nothing. Like he was just gone. And that's the first and last time that I ever had a kind of encounter like that. And that wasn't too short after like talking with somebody like very much like you do with like the natives of New Orleans. That's usually a topic that people bring up a lot. Is they're like the only city with real vampires. Like it's a
they're not the only city, but they're definitely a city that has them.
Yeah.
So that heightened sense. That's what you were talking about, Dana, when you were out. And you said that when the stick got thrown at you guys, you felt like there was this heightened sense of like a fear. You could feel it.
Yeah.
Palpable.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
When
there was another time.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Go ahead.
Well, another time when we had a camp out there, and the men had gone across the river. I was there it was like our camp's on an island type. And the they left me. I had my daughter. She was like a baby at the time. And they left me on the island by myself. And they took across the river to go coon hunting or whatever with their coon dogs. And so and the water was up high during that time of the year. It was all the way to the back of the camp. And I could hear something walking in the water, and then it hit the side of the camp, whatever it was. It scared me half to death. And I'm thinking, oh my God, here I am by myself out here with, no one's on the island. It's just me and my baby. She was a baby at the time, and my husband at the time was running across the river, and he couldn't hurt anything. So, but that feeling of being, okay, what is that hitting the side of the camp? Like definitely just because I heard the water, something walking in the water, and then boom, and it's like, huh. So I just sat there and I'm looking around thinking, what am I going to do if it comes through that door?
Oh my God. Did you have a firearm at least?
Well, we had them in there, but I wasn't really familiar with that particular
type of weapon. Yeah.
But I said, I'll figure it out if I have to. But
yeah, you better, because I mean, that is such a, it's just to me, that region, that area is such a creepy place. My cousin actually played baseball down in Louisiana. I can't remember what school it was, and then for like a year or so. I want to say Lafayette, but I'm not for sure if that's the school he played for. And I know for years he lived in Alexandria, and then he ended up moving back to Texas and playing his last 2 years of college ball at Texas A&M. He was a pitcher, Clayton Turner. But I know that area, of Louisiana, it's always I've been all over Louisiana, Baton Rouge. I've been to Bossier. I've been all up and down, and I've been all over it. And it's always giving me the creeps. I was in a vehicle one time on the border of Mississippi and Louisiana, and the vehicle broke down. And I was a young guy, and I just remember, you know what? I'm just going to take a nap. And because, there was nothing we could do. And we were waiting on someone, we were waiting on daylight so we could walk, and the people I was with, they were responsible for the upkeep of that vehicle, not me. And so I was like, I'm not walking. You can walk to the next city. I'm just going to wait here till you come back. So, and they started walking right before daybreak. And then it felt like something bumped the vehicle. And I just remember thinking, man, this is the creepiest area. And so I just was like, you know what? I just put my jacket over my head and just waited until daylight. And then at the daylight, somebody's knocking on. It's just a trooper, you're knocking. You need some help? And I was like, yeah. My friend and his girlfriend went to go get, help, whatever. And then they came back with a tow truck. And then we ended up getting a ride back into town, whatever. Because we didn't have cell phones. This was the 90s. And so we had to walk. And then that officer sat there, BSing with me for a while. And he was basically like no bones about it. He was like, yeah, we've had some people go missing in this area. And I'm like, oh, that's great. I told him, I said, something bumped into the vehicle. And he goes, well, it might have been an alligator. It might have been a freaking hog. He's no telling, And so I was like, yeah, well, I didn't get out to inspect. I'm good, And so he was a very nice guy. And he kind of hung out there with me for a little bit. And then and then my friends made it back and we went into town But that whole area just gives off a vibe, and I mean, I could never live in that area. I know if you guys have grown up there and you're from there, I get it, but I just couldn't. I couldn't live in that area where everything in the water has something predatory, like that. I just can't. I just couldn't do it, and it's not a way for me to live. I mean, so you grew up in that area. You grew up around that area, and let me ask you another question.
Yeah.
Going out in the swamp with Harlan, your grandfather, okay, who he kind of put Honey Island on the map with the stories of this creature. Did he ever tell you that he was taking you along as bait? Did he ever?
No, he didn't tell me that, but I remember he had this goat that he was going to go stake out, and we the kids, he brought this goat home, and he had it out in the yard, and we were playing with the goat, all day to the next day. Because he's taking the goat off with the leash, and I'm like, where are you going with the goat? And And he's like, I'm gonna use it for bait to see if this thing's gonna come after it. And he was gonna get up in the tree blind and stake the goat out. And we were horrified as kids. Oh my God, it's gonna eat the swamp. The swamp monster's gonna eat the goat. And so at the end of the day, he come back with the goat, and he said that it's probably either vegetarian or he was too smart for him, And so we were happy he brought the goat back.
And you were like, "What? It was usually me that stood underneath the tree, Grandpa. Why do you need the goat?" No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
just stay there still underneath the tree. It's a game we're playing. But so you went with him. You went with him out there. And was there any times when you were a child that when you were out there that you felt uneasy or you saw like you maybe something that
well, as a child, I guess we spent so much time we had a houseboat out there, and every weekend we were out there on the houseboat for the weekend. And then later, when I got older, we they had a camp that was when our houseboat sunk, and the camp around the bend is where we ended up going every weekend from then on. But just being out there as a child, I was more adventurous when I was young because I didn't think about the dangers, of like now, like if my children do the things I used to do, I would have a heart attack. But like one time I would jump off the top of the houseboat in the river, and we would float on life jackets all the way to the boat launch, which was probably about a mile down the river right at dark where the alligators come out.
Oh my gosh.
And big snapper turtles, but as a kid I didn't think about that being, I remember
that's
at
just
that
part
time,
of the adventure. As
it's getting dark, starting to think, yeah, I remember Daddy telling me about the alligators at night. They hunt at night.
Mm-hmm.
And I started getting, but I wasn't terrified as like I would be now if my daughter decides to jump off into the river and swim at night all the way to the land, and I wouldn't like that at all. But when you're out there, you just feel like I can remember being scared at times when we were sitting around a campfire and hearing something in the woods in the background, and I always would remember, my grandfather's story about what he had encountered, and hearing other people talk about what they had encountered. So yeah, I was always on it, looking over my shoulder, like what is going to come out of them woods at any given time. But you live out there, so you got to just deal with it.
And let me ask you this, Dana, these encounters you got, like, can you give us a couple of these encounters? Like, tell me what the descriptions, like what happened to these people?
Well, yeah, let's see. We had, I'll pull my book out here, and I could read you this part on the back of where my grandfather, this was what my grandfather wrote about what happened.
And the name of the book.
You want me to read that one?
Yeah, just
Honey on the Swamp Monster Documentations, and this was just a part of the story I pulled out. It says, we were walking fast with a heavy load when we saw the hindquarters of what appeared to be a large animal standing on four legs in the trail. That was my grandfather wrote this. We were used to seeing all sorts of known animals in this swamp area, but as we approached within 20 feet, Bill exclaimed in a loud voice, "What the hell is that thing?" The creature had evidently failed to hear us approaching up the trail, but at the loud sound of Bill's voice, it swung around and faced us. This thing glared at us in a ferocious manner for only a split second, then rose up and ran on its hind legs, disappearing over a mound of briars and brush. It was about 7 feet tall and would weigh approximately 400 pounds. Wow. That was his encounter. But
the legs, were they canine-like or were they human-like?
He just said it stood up on two legs and ran off, like away from them, as they were trying to pull their guns out of their back they had their guns packed away because they were going through a clearing a trail they had made to get to this area, this campsite they were building, and they were bringing supplies. So they had everything. They were carrying stuff, and they were walking down that trail when they come up on it. That was the first time in '63. But they have. I have some other eyewitness stories. Like I'll read this out of the book from like Denny Crawford said. I was on a 3-wheeler when I spotted a large animal crossing a slough moving quickly up the levee. And he thought it was a bear at first. And then he goes on to talk about how he went after it. And then as he kept hearing something rip bark out of like it was breaking bark and like smacking as if it was eating bugs out of a tree or something. And he said he come up on it, and he was looking through the brush at it, and he said the width of its shoulders and how big it was. And he said it had a more of a flat back instead of it being rounded like a bear. And he said that he knew if he shot and missed or, didn't kill it, and he only had that one bullet. He said he just started backing up, away from, and then he turned and ran back to his 3-wheeler and got out of there. But, because he said he wouldn't want to shoot it and miss and have that big thing come after him.
I don't blame him. That'd be a horrifying prospect. Yeah.
Another guy named Fred Lehman, he said he took this gal out to his buddy's camp, and it was way out in the middle of the swamp, and it started raining really bad. And he said that suddenly the window broke and his fist slammed through it. It was a hairy fist, and it broke the window. And this girl that he was with, she started screaming, and he got a shotgun, and he blew the door open and started to shoot. And he said it was a bunch of them roaming around in the rain, like these hairy looking things roaming around. He said he shot towards them, and they scattered. And then he said that, by the time the morning came, that girl, he took her out of there. He said she never would go back camping with me again, which I don't blame.
Oh, man, who would? Yeah.
But he said it was like a territorial thing. Like they didn't want him there. And he, they broke through the window. And then, let's see, this woman, Deborah Chester, this was more recent over probably in the last 10 years, maybe, or maybe 5 years. She said that she was going down the road, and this wasn't really in the swamp. This was close to the swamp, but it was more of like an area that had farms with cows and pastures with animals. And she said that this creature crossed the road in front of her, and jumped over this gate and disappeared in the woods. So she said that she could see it had long hair on its hanging from its arms, and when it went over the fence, she said she knew it wasn't human. She'd never seen anything like it, and that was probably an hour from where we are here driving wise. But the swamps, like this Honey Island, part of this Honey Island swamp connects to the Bogachita swamp, which is further up that way where she is. And so it was probably the same creature. It's just maybe going to get food out in the pasture or something. I don't know.
What color was the hair of this?
Yeah, the fur hair.
She said it was like let me see where I wrote this. She said that had long hair hanging from its long arms, and it walked like a human, but it wasn't human. I don't think she really told me what color. Or maybe she did. I just didn't write it in here, but she just said she remembered it was hanging, like if its arm was sticking out, it would be hanging from like all the way, for ways off the arm. And another more recent in the last 10 years was this guy Jerry Ross told me that he had he had a camp out there, and he had gone out there, and he had a generator running, and he said that he went in this camp, all of a sudden his generator went off, and he thought, that's odd. So he knew he had filled it up with gas or whatever, and he goes out there, and as he walks up to the generator, he saw this thing standing by it, like huge, and he said he turned and went back quickly to his camp. And he said it wouldn't leave, so he had this flare gun, and he shot out. And he said this thing got up in the tree, and it stayed there all, it wasn't going anywhere till daylight. And he even though he would shoot flares out to try to scare it off, and he said he didn't go back to his camp out there for like 2 years, and then he finally went back out there, but So he said it turned his generator off. It must have not have liked the sound of the generator, because the generator is pretty loud, and it ripped it loose, whatever it was, and so yeah, they've had a lot of stories like that, and a lot of different eyewitnesses in the area over the years. That's what inspired me, besides my grandfather's story, just coming across people that would come to our camp or whatever and be talking about it, and and then I'd end up hearing their story, or they'd say so-and-so saw, and then I would get their name and go try to find them and talk to them. And that's what kind of inspired me to write the book and do the documentary film. Because I didn't realize that. Huh?
Oh, I'm sorry. You were on, what show was it on? You were on a show too. I can't remember what it was.
Mysteries at the Museum.
No, I saw you on a TV show. I was just flipping through on Travel Channel, or I don't remember which. There's only really one show I watch on there every once in a while, and it's I think it's These Woods Are Haunted. And I did a spot for them. They had as of this when this airs, I don't know if they have released it or not, but it was a show that I did with them because I'm friends with the producer. But I'm trying to remember what show you were on, and they showed your grandfather's 8mm footage of the creature. Yeah, was it Monster Quest?
I think it was either Mysteries at the Museum, or I've been on several shows that air on the Travel Channel, and they usually all try to, show that footage. They always usually ask if they could show it, and
it's compelling. I mean, I saw it, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And what was cool was like I watched it, and it wasn't even that long ago. And my wife's like, "Aren't you friends with her?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I was like, "She's on my Facebook. I should probably hit her up." And then we could and then we started corresponding back and forth for months, and we never could coordinate when we could get it done. We're both very busy people, And then I don't know how many times we set up a time. Hey, we'll talk tonight, and then we'd message back and forth, and then we never could get connected. And finally I told myself I got to get this done, and I just been wanting to interview you for a while and get the Honey Island Swamp. Because my cousin Clayton's wife's from Louisiana, and they asked me if I had ever heard of the Honey Island Swamp Monster, and I said, yeah, and I actually know a person that's kind of the authority on that. It's you. And I was like, she's on my Facebook, and his wife's like, really? And I was like, yeah, they asked me about that, if I knew, about the creature, and I was like, yeah, I've definitely haven't researched it as much as you have, but I've come across it. I had someone who claimed to have been out on a boat, alligator hunting in the area in this bayou, and down in the bayou, and they told me that they saw something on the shore, but that the hair on this creature in the sunlight looked almost blonde. And I thought that was weird. I thought that was really weird. And they said that it looked like it had blondish brown hair, like a human would have, really, but like if a person was just really hairy, not like fur. But they said that the legs were weird looking, and they couldn't really,
just long and stringy.
Yeah, like long hair hanging all over this thing's body, and that it was blonde, and that it was actually the creature itself was very statuesque, and the way they were describing it, I was like, "Are you sure you weren't just daydreaming? It was a blonde, it was a girl or something. You've been out in the swamp too long, Cliff." And he was like, "No, no, no," And he's like, "No, it was a creature, and it definitely wasn't a female." And I was like, "Okay, well, blonde hair." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And so he was trying to describe it to me, and we were in a bar, and this was years ago, and he told me that he goes, it was a monster, kind of like the Honey Island swamp monster. When he said that looking back on that was the first time in my life. I was probably in my 20s when he told me that, and I was like, I had never heard of the Honey Island swamp monster up to that point, and then years later, I heard about it again. All right, folks, so that's all the time we have for today. Tune in this coming Friday next week as we finish up with part 2 with Dana Holyfield talking about the Honey Island swamp monster. See ya.